The sandwich slipped from her trembling hands and landed on the cold tile floor just as the little girl's stomach growled loud enough for the whole diner to hear, and in that single, fragile moment, everything Emily Carter believed about survival, sacrifice, and fate was quietly rewritten. Before the story pulls you any deeper, take a second right now. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and small acts that change lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. Emily Carter had learned early in life that hunger was not just a feeling but a constant companion. At 23, she worked double shifts at a roadside diner just outside a quiet American town, a place most people passed through without noticing. Her days blurred into one another, measured by the clatter of plates, the smell of burnt coffee, and the ache in her feet that never fully went away. She lived in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a radiator that rattled like it might give up any day, but she kept going because quitting was never an option. Her mother had passed years earlier, leaving Emily with medical bills and a stubborn belief that decency mattered, even when life made no promises in return. That morning had started like most others, with Emily skipping breakfast so she could stretch her grocery money until the end of the week. The sandwich wrapped in wax paper in her bag was meant to be her only meal until late evening. She guarded it carefully, not out of greed, but out of necessity. The diner was busy that day, filled with truck drivers, office workers, and travelers who barely looked up as they ate. Emily moved between tables with practiced efficiency, offering polite smiles while quietly counting tips in her head, calculating rent, electricity, and the growing fear that one bad week could undo her completely. That was when she noticed the little girl sitting alone near the window. The child couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, her clothes neat but worn, her hands folded tightly in her lap as she stared at a glass of water she hadn't touched. There was no adult nearby, no food on the table, just a silent stillness that didn't belong in a place so full of noise. Emily felt something twist in her chest, a familiar ache that came from recognizing a reflection of her own childhood in someone else. As Emily passed by with a tray, she heard the unmistakable sound of hunger, the kind that carried both embarrassment and resignation. She hesitated. She thought about her empty apartment, about the long hours ahead, about how little she had to give. And yet, something stronger than fear pushed her forward. She reached into her bag, pulled out the sandwich she had saved all morning, and placed it gently in front of the girl, hoping the manager wouldn't notice and that the universe wouldn't punish her for one small act of compassion. The little girl ate slowly, carefully, as if afraid the food might disappear if she rushed. Emily returned to work, pretending nothing had happened, but her heart beat faster with every step. She didn't know where the child's parents were or why she was alone, and she didn't ask. She simply believed that no child should sit hungry when help was within reach, even if that help came at a personal cost. What Emily didn't know was that this moment was being watched. Across the diner, a man sat in a corner booth, his posture calm, his eyes sharp and observant. He was dressed simply, blending in like any other traveler, but his presence carried a quiet authority. His name was Jonathan Reed, and beneath the unassuming jacket and tired expression was a man who had built an empire from nothing, a self-made millionaire who understood poverty more intimately than most people realized. Jonathan had stepped outside briefly to take a call, leaving his daughter Lily at the table while he handled urgent business. The call had lasted longer than expected, and when he returned, he saw Lily eating a sandwich she hadn't ordered, her eyes brighter than they had been all day. He noticed Emily watching from behind the counter, concern and relief etched into her face. Jonathan didn't interrupt. He didn't announce who he was or ask questions. He simply observed, letting the scene unfold naturally, feeling something stir that no boardroom success had ever given him. Jonathan's life had been defined by loss and ambition. He had grown up poor, raised by a father who worked himself into an early grave and a mother who taught him the value of integrity over comfort. Wealth had come later, but it had never replaced the lessons of his youth. In recent years, success had isolated him, surrounding him with people who praised him for his money rather than his character. Watching Emily offer her own meal to his child without hesitation reminded him of a world he feared was disappearing. Emily finished her shift exhausted and hungry, her body protesting every movement. She cleaned tables, wiped counters, and clocked out with barely enough tips to make the day feel worthwhile. She left the diner unaware that Jonathan had spoken quietly with the manager, asking questions about her, learning about her hours, her work ethic, and the life she carried on her shoulders. Over the next few days, Emily returned to her routine, unaware that something had shifted. Bills piled up, her car began making worrying noises, and the pressure of survival pressed harder than ever. There were nights she lay awake wondering how long she could keep going, questioning whether kindness was a luxury she could no longer afford. Yet, despite everything, she didn't regret the sandwich. Some small part of her felt lighter for having given it away. A week later, Jonathan returned to the diner. This time, he stayed longer, watching Emily move through the room with the same quiet grace, never complaining, always attentive. He noticed how she helped an elderly customer to their seat, how she refilled a forgotten cup without being asked, how she treated everyone with the same respect regardless of what they tipped. To Jonathan, these details mattered more than spreadsheets and profit margins ever had. After leaving, Jonathan made arrangements that would change Emily's life in ways she could never imagine. He contacted local organizations, reviewed her background, and verified everything the manager had shared. He learned about her mother, her struggles, and her dreams that had been put on hold because survival came first. And still, he said nothing, choosing patience over spectacle. Weeks passed, and Emily's situation grew more precarious. One evening, she received a notice from her landlord warning of late rent. Her hand shook as she read it, the weight of uncertainty threatening to crush her spirit. She felt invisible, like the world took without ever giving back. And then, unexpectedly, the diner manager called her into the office with an expression she couldn't read. Emily listened as the manager explained that a customer had left something for her. Confusion turned to disbelief as she was handed an envelope containing not just money, but a letter. The words inside spoke of gratitude, of a father who had seen her kindness when she thought no one was watching, of a belief that compassion deserved to be rewarded, not exploited. Jonathan didn't stop there. Through carefully planned steps, he offered Emily opportunities rather than handouts. He paid off her medical debts anonymously, arranged for her car to be repaired, and connected her with a scholarship program tied to a foundation he quietly funded. He believed that dignity mattered, that true generosity lifted people without making them feel small. Emily's world began to change, slowly at first, then all at once. Stress that had once consumed her thoughts began to loosen its grip. She enrolled in evening classes, something she had dreamed of but never thought possible. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by fear. Months later, Emily finally learned the full truth. She met Jonathan and Lily again, not as strangers, but as people bound by a moment of shared humanity. She understood then that the men whose daughter she had fed was not just wealthy in money, but in values. The realization overwhelmed her, not because of the wealth involved, but because her smallest act had rippled outward in ways she could never have planned. Jonathan watched Emily grow, not as a benefactor seeking praise, but as someone restoring balance to a world that had given him so much. He saw in her the proof that kindness still existed, that hope wasn't naive, and that change didn't always come from grand gestures but from quiet sacrifices made when no one was watching. Just before we reach the ending, please pause for a moment and comment below what this story made you feel, because your words matter more than you realize. Years later, Emily stood in a different place entirely, her life transformed, yet her heart unchanged. She still believed in helping when she could, still remembered what it felt like to choose between hunger and compassion. She carried that memory like a compass, guiding her decisions, reminding her that who she was at her lowest mattered more than anything she gained later. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness is never wasted and that even the smallest act can change a life, please like this video, share it, and stay connected with this channel. Your engagement helps spread stories that remind the world we are all capable of being someone's miracle, even when we feel like we have nothing left to give.